Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm making this video. Until recently, I didn't even know this was a question. Okay, two things are about to happen. One, everything I say in this video is going to sound incredibly obvious, simplistic even. Two, at the end of this, you're going to wonder why it is that modern-day Egyptology doesn't know this stuff. Let me get the basic question out of the way first. I'll start trying to answer the follow-up question in the later videos. Let's get started. Okay, the question of why the Egyptians built the pyramids has two components. First, why did the ancients build literal stairways to heaven, a phenomenon we find all over the world, from Aztec temples to Mesopotamian ziggurats? This is something ubiquitous in ancient times. The pyramids are simply the Egyptian version of this. Two, common, yes, but the Egyptian version had a distinctive feature, didn't it? This is what made them so mysterious, and whether you realize it or not, when you ask the title question, this is what you're really asking, which is, why, in the Egyptian version, is the stairway on the inside of the building, where it seems like no one can get to it? And that's where it gets really interesting. So, first, why did the ancients build stairways to heaven? What even is a stairway to heaven? This is the easy part. From humanity's earliest days, from cave painting times, people were interested in, preoccupied even, with questions about the afterlife, the spiritual, the religious. And those early forms of religious expression tended to be very literal, very visual. And in those days, if you had an idea of a benevolent god or spirit, you were likely to connect it to the sun and to sunlight, because of course you were. Darkness was scary in ancient times. Step in a hole, break an ankle, my gosh, you could die from that. Can't even see predators, can't see enemies. Start growing crops and the sun is directly giving you food. Of course, early humans thought of benevolent gods in terms of the sun. All right, so how do you progress in this ancient spiritual journey? Remember, everything right now is highly literal. It has to be. We need complex vocabulary. Really, we need a writing system that's not using pictures in order to convey complex religious ideas. Back then, it was all simple and direct. And for the sun, it was all about proximity. You want more blessings from the sun? You want more of that power in your life? Well, it's time to gain altitude. Start climbing. Mountains take on spiritual significance, like with Mount Olympus. Hills, North American tribes have what we call medicine mounds. Bad translation. You get a lot of that one. So much of magic was connected to healing. Hill of magic is what they meant. High place, closer to the sun. All right, but what if there's another spot with a special metaphysical connection for you? Anything, a special burial site, a location of a big battle, even just a place where you had a vivid dream you thought was meaningful. Well, in that case, you're going to have to build your own mountain, aren't you? And this actually has its advantages, because now you can purposely build this stairway. You can put an altar at the top. By the time we pick up the historical narrative, the Babylonians are placing mansions at the top of theirs, actual homes where the gods could just sort of hang out, until you needed to ask them for something. The idea with all of these is that if you can get closer to the power source, the sun especially, but also the moon and the stars, then you can access that power like an antenna and bring that power down to ground level where it can be used for your people. For your people. Which is why the stairways are always on the outside of the buildings. So, what exactly were the Egyptians getting up to? Here we need some context. You see, the ancient world was plagued by a sort of catch-22. You wanted to live in a fertile region because that's where the food was. Unfortunately, it's also where most diseases were. In places like the Fertile Crescent, you were much less likely to starve and much more likely to die from some sort of pathogen. Much more likely. Which is why a lot of our early civilizations, Assyrian, Persian, etc., are coming out of semi-arid regions. Less disease. But, less ability to grow food as well, which puts something on a cap on how large and how powerful they could become. Egypt had the best of both worlds. They were the beneficiaries of the Nile River and the annual flooding that occurred as the river swelled with the snowmelt from the mountains to the south. It was a river with a floodplain snaking its way through a desert, and Egyptian society took full advantage, building their cities a mile, 2 miles out into the desert, then commuting into the floodplain where they grew their crops, all the food with low exposure to the major vectors of disease. There was just one problem. Somewhere Along the way, lost in the annals of time, the ancient Egyptians stopped doing what all the other ancients were doing. With the aforementioned Aztecs and Babylonians, like every other pagan culture I know of, religious expression was a kind of negotiation. We sacrifice X and Y. The gods give us Z. With the Nile flooding, the Egyptians eventually stopped giving thanks, and they started taking credit. They thought they were doing it through the power of their own magic, and that sent them down a very different path from other ancient cultures. Because they didn't just believe that they could communicate with the gods. They thought they were so powerful that they could destroy them. Kurt Seligman, in his book A History of Magic, quotes an Egyptian spell where the magician threatens to shoot lightning into Shu, the sky god, causing the sky to fall and destroy the earth. The Neoplatonist Porphyry of Tyre asked the Egyptian beliefs, how is it possible that the gods should be subject to extortion like men? I actually ran across the common belief just the other day while reading Sophocles, who, writing in the 5th century BC, had Creon, king of Thebes, in his play Antigone, explaining why he wasn't overly concerned with his actions. He has Creon say, "No man can defile the gods." But what if you believed you had a system of knowledge that allowed you, or anyone else who could get their hands on that knowledge, to defile the gods? Knowledge that would literally place them above the most powerful beings that they could conceive of. And the answer is that you would become an occult society. Occult. Same root word as occluded, as in shielded, covered, hidden, secretive. You would live in a secretive society. A society where you went to enormous lengths to hide your special powers. This video is from Metatron, an ancient linguist and historian, and a good one, as near as I can tell. The Egyptologist is one more piece of evidence in why you should never get a degree in Egyptology. I'm going to answer a few of the questions these two have trouble with in later videos. The one I want to address now is on hair. Why did the Egyptians shave their hair? And the two answers given are 1, a 3,000-year-long lice infestation, or maybe 2, ritual purity. Yeah, just a couple problems. If it's lice, why are you shaving all your hair, including your eyebrows? And if the answer is ritual purity, you're just cleaner before the gods without hair, then why did they wear wigs made of human hair? No, there's only one explanation that fits all the facts. Why are you shaving? Why are you destroying your hair? Because you live in an occult society, a society inundated with a belief in magic, and you don't want someone else getting a hold of your hair and using it against you in a curse. That's why the only hair you've got is something you can carefully control, like the side knot, popular among boys in the middle classes. And that's not the only thing they hid. Their language. Those funky hieroglyphs. No one except official priests were allowed to know them or write them. Why not? Because this is an occult society, and in this case, you really do believe that knowledge is power. Hieroglyphs were believed to be imbued with magical power, and remember, we're not sharing any of that magical power. What else did they hide? Their names. Every Egyptian had a Ren, a secret name, their real name, known only to them and their parents, because just like with the hair, the Egyptians believed that knowing the true name of a person, or even of a god, gave you power over them. So you had a public name that was essentially meaningless, like a nickname. And then you had the private name, your real name, your Ren, that stayed, you guessed it, secret. This is an occult society. And finally, for the pyramids, do I even need to say it? Of course, the ancient Egyptians were not going to just leave their magical space antenna where just anyone could access that power. This is the difference. For the rest of the world, their stairways to heaven were thought of like satellite receivers. You're just collecting what's already there. You're not controlling it. And so you might have some security for your satellite. You got a door, it's got a deadbolt. But if you thought you could control that power, could use it like, say, atomic energy, wield it like a weapon, well, now you're going to treat it a little differently, aren't you? Now it has to be encased in something like a secure facility. And that's what we see. to the extent that we see anything. We haven't been inside that many of them, but the ones we have are all these bizarre collections of ascending corridors, galleries, and chimneys, fitted with security features that only make sense to an occult society. Things like blocking stones for a corridor that's only 8 inches wide. You're not stopping a burglar with that. You're stopping an enemy magician ascending in his or her bird form. I'm not kidding. So, why did the Egyptians build the pyramids? To get closer to the heavens, just like so many other ancient societies. Why did they put their stairways on the inside of the structure, protected by all sorts of blocking stones, curses, and general Indiana Jones stuff? Because they thought their magical system could destroy the world and control the spiritual world, and they didn't want the power falling into anyone else's hands. They were an occult society. This is David Reichert from The Bunker. Our second book, Fluid Shock, is now available from our publisher or from Amazon. Don't miss the next book in our award-winning pandemic horror series, The Holocaust Engine. Link below.